The American dream, a job, a family, and of course, a house for them to live in. It seems so simple, doesn't it? I mean, it's really not asking for that much, just the basic pillars of a good, comfortable life. That might be how it used to be, but we're long past believing that it is truly that simple. There's no quote that encapsulates this new and disillusioned sentiment better than George Carlin. It's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it. And well, ain't that the truth? Housing prices are astronomical and continue to climb. Salaries can't keep up with inflation, and even the middle class can't afford such a simple, basic thing as actually owning the roof over their head. I know we have all read those articles, or if we're being honest with ourselves, seen the stories and shorts and TikToks about how it's our fault for buying too much Starbucks, enraging a whole generation. So today, we want to look at the actual reason why home ownership seems so far out of reach. Welcome to Rebel Economics, and in some ways, welcome back, because this channel has been on somewhat of a hiatus, and well, we're back and committed to posting a new video every week. And no, I won't ask you to like and subscribe. Not yet anyways, that comes at the end when I've hopefully convinced you all that it's worth it. So let's just dive right into the deep end and look at the first thought that comes to mind. Houses are just too expensive. And while obviously that's not the whole story, it's honestly quite a big part of it. In 1985 in the US, the median sales price of a house was $82,800. I know what you're thinking. What a steal! And, well, yes and no. Back then, the median annual household income was also significantly lower than it is today. So with a median income of $23,620, buying a house back then would still take you about 3.5 years worth of your complete annual salary to buy, which honestly is not nothing. And on top of that, in 1985, the average fixed mortgage rate for a 30-year period was about 12.4%. That is incredibly high when compared to the 6.8% that we have in 2025. But there are two huge factors that make it so hard for us to buy a house now in comparison to 1985. First and foremost, the actual price of the home. In 2025, the median sales price of a house in the US was $416,900. That is a 403% increase over the past 40 years. And in comparison to that, the wages have just not kept up. Yes, they have increased, but nowhere close to what they would need to be to keep up with the cost of a home. The median household income in the US in 2025 was $83,150. So in the past 40 years, that is an increase of 252%. That would sound pretty good if we don't have to compare it to the 403% of increase of the price of a house. This means that now it takes 5 years of a full household income to be able to buy a home. Just think about this. In order to still be able to buy a house in 2025, in 3.5 years of a full household income, you would need an income of nearly $120,000 a year. And I think it's fair to say that that is just not the case for most people. The huge discrepancy between income and costs of owning a house are now even worse than in the direct lead-up of the 2008 crisis. While there was a quick plummeting of housing prices in the aftermath of the real estate bubble bursting in 2008, since 2020, housing prices have done much more than just recover. They are even higher now than ever before. And this is not just happening in the US. As a matter of fact, the numbers are even worse if we look at the neighbors to the north. In Canada, in 1985, it took you only 2.5 years worth of income to buy a house, whereas in 2025, it takes a whacking 8.2 years. And the same is true for Europe. As a matter of fact, we don't even have to go as far back as 1985. Just between 2010 and 2024, across the EU, house prices have increased 47%, while incomes only rose by 20%. effectively making homes more than twice as expensive. Obviously, not all European countries are hit in the same way, and Hungary is the unlucky leader in this race, with an increase of 185% in house prices between 2010 to 2024. And other countries, especially in the south of Europe, are facing severe issues with housing prices, resulting in over 50% of young adults aged 25 to 34 living with their parents because they simply can't afford not to. There are a ton of different factors causing this misery, and going into them in detail would probably be a whole nother video. But here's some of the highlights. First of all, simple supply and demand. Most countries just did not build enough homes. The 2008 crisis is a main culprit here. The immediate damage was one thing, and everyone felt its effects. But we tend to forget about the long-term consequences of it. Because while the stock market may have recovered, construction did not. Even now, 18 years later, construction never recovered to pre-2008 levels. As a result, the US is short 3.7 million homes. After so much trust was destroyed, the system reacted in the only way it knew how to, putting more rules and restrictions into place in order to prevent the 2008 crisis from ever happening again. So now, even those people who could afford to build a new home for themselves are faced with zoning restrictions and slow permits, putting serious hurdles in the way of owning their own home. Apart from this, there's another key contributor. Houses are not just homes anymore. They're not places for families to build their lives, for you to come home after a long day's work. No, they are assets. And we've seen how much housing prices have increased in the past 40 years. So it's not just an asset, but a top performing asset that has a return on investment like few others. So it is no wonder that institutional investors and private equity firms have become increasingly interested in the housing market. They drive up competition over a limited amount of houses available, and as always, with such an unequilibrated supply and demand, the prices spike. Institutional investors bought 15% of all US homes in 2021, which is up 8% from 2010. This includes hedge funds, private equity firms, and large corporate landlords. This means that the number of homes bought by this type of investor has nearly doubled. In some cities, they buy nearly a third of all homes, making the already tense situation in urban areas even worse. After all, cities are a magnet of economic activity. So if you're someone who has to go into the city to work and don't want to commute for a couple of hours every day just to get to your job, well, you really don't have that many options. You can't afford to buy, so you just have to rent. And I know, this video has focused on the idea of home ownership, but believe me, the prices for renting a home are just as bad, if not worse, than buying. And this is unlikely to just go away anytime soon. I mean, the last fall in housing prices only happened because of global economic crisis. No one wants that to happen again, especially not the institutions in place. So the mechanisms that were put in place to prevent something similar to happen will likely stay in place and keep restricting the possibility of building new homes, meaning that the supply shortage won't go away. And neither will the demand, or at least not at the rate that we would need it to in order for this problem to be fixed anytime soon. Though most Western countries have an inverted population triangle, meaning more old people compared to fewer and fewer young people, this does not fix the situation. Aging populations tend to hold onto homes longer, reducing turnover. Supply and demand are predicted to remain out of whack. Both the IMF and the OECD predicted that the rate of increase in housing prices may slow down, but it will continue to rise. Supply shortages will persist. The chronic underbuilding of the past 10 to 15 years has made sure of that. Price-to-income ratios will remain elevated. Salaries just can't keep up with the inflated prices due to the high interest of large investors in the housing market. And this won't change anytime soon. Even those who want to build new homes face systematic hurdles like zoning restrictions and slow permits, as well as high construction costs because of the prices of materials and labor shortages. Further condenses the number of people that compete over the few housing resources available within the urban nucleus, increasing competition in cities and suburbs even more. With limited space to build and surging demand, supply remains small and has no chance of getting even close to keeping up with the number of people who want to live in these urban areas. So, sadly for us, the American dream will in fact remain just that, a dream. And yes, the outlook on home ownership is pretty bleak. The American dream could only exist under very specific conditions. Cheap land, high wages, stable jobs, a growing middle class. Well, perhaps we're living through the American nightmare. Because now we are facing job insecurity, a shrinking middle class, expensive land and properties, and wages that just can't keep up with the prices of the asset that they're supposed to buy. I wish there'd be a happier ending to this video, but I guess not today. So anyways, thanks so much for sticking it out and for watching. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week here on Rebel Economics.